A question from Casey Kraft. So thank you for giving this talk. It's very pertinent as these topics become increasingly important in daily patient care. How would you recommend residents get involved in medical innovation and development earlier in their training? Early interest and involvement and mentorship can be critical to success, but is not always easy to find.
Great. No, thank you for that. I think that really starting at it really is, I look to the research fellows, I look to the residents for new ideas. As one of the former editor-in-chief of the journal, Dr. Bob Goldwyn, always said, everyone is someone. And I really truly take that to heart. I learn a lot from medical students, from research fellows, from the residents. I think in terms of getting involved, it really is that local level. Approaching folks in your own programs and your own hospitals there's always a tech venture office in every hospital for training, and seeing what projects are out there. My greatest collaborators, of course, are not physicians. They are engineers. These days, there's a lot of activity in terms of bringing both the clinical side of things and the engineering side of things together. If you have an engineering school nearby, I'm sure they have events like this to try to bring these people together, and that's an easy way of trying to kickstart some ideas. Now, these projects take time, as you can see, over time, and if you happen to be in a location wherever you end up landing or in practice, it's just a question of that. But the world is a small place, so we can always collaborate from a distance, and that's always a possibility. But aside from that, in the society, there's in ASPS specifically, there's a research subcommittee, and aside from other committees such as social media that residents can get involved with over time.
So this is a practical question from one of my co-resident ambassadors, Francesco Egro. So he asks, when will your arterial coupler be available? I want one.
Thanks. I wish I had a crystal ball and could be able to tell you for sure. I thank you for that question. It's an engineering challenge, actually, and we continue to still work on it. But I'm hopeful that we'll be able to come up with something soon.
So the next two questions, one is from one of the residents, and then Kyle Sanyek, and then this other question from Dr. Rourke. They actually both ask a similar question. So Kyle asked, as healthcare institutions continue to push towards decreased costs and cost containment, often innovation and technology runs counter in the short term to budgetary constraints. So how do you suggest we overcome this obstacle? And Dr. Rourke asked, how do you envision plastic surgery being able to incorporate all of these great innovations into the everyday practice plastic surgery in a cost-effective manner? So I think both asking about costs and how we make that practical reality.
Yeah, great questions, and thanks very much. Cost is obviously always at the forefront, and with the shrinking NIH budget, and I, for one, for sure saw that very clearly once with a sea change about a year and a half ago when all NIH funding was cut 20%, and this is from a promised amount to 20% down. Everything sort of changes. So, we looked at the degree of funding and finding new innovative ways of actually looking for funding, and so meaning industry as one route, partnering with industry partners in terms of driving technology. Grant writing, of course, is always something that could be done on that level. From a hospital standpoint, it's continuing to work with administration and demonstrating data and really showing change and cost-effective change with whatever it is that you're trying to implement. But that requires time and modeling, financial modeling, developing pro formas to really convince people, and that definitely doesn't doesn't happen overnight. So it's really framing the question correctly, and then execution of your strategy. So it takes a lot of time and effort for sure. I don't have all the answers to that for sure, and I'm still working at it. But hopefully in time, some of these things will bear some fruit. Specifically with 3D printing, the amount of cost it is to print any of these PLA, PGA devices is really cents on the dollar. And I can tell you that right away that we're trying to implement now, for instance, with 3D printed metal constructs for the face, facial skeleton, and trauma, will definitely save operating room cost. With a pre-printed metal plate that is somewhat like a half mask, that saves, we all know that it would save, a significant amount of time shaping plates for really significant defects. So that's one practical thing, but a lot of these other things will take time, of course.
From Aris Libyan, thank you for an amazing talk, Dr. Lin. What do you think are the main challenges in translating these technologies from bench to bedside? In your experience, what have been key steps or learning points in efficiently but safely moving from innovation to clinical application?
Sure. Well, for some of the first-in-human trials, it takes time, but you need great collaborators. Everything has to be solid. All the science has to be solid. And lastly, I think you have to partner with your IRB and IACUC committees very well. They have to understand clearly what you're doing, and that's been my sort of experience in terms of doing some of these first-in-human trials. It's pretty neat to be able to bring something from the bench to the bedside that way. Now, looking at it from a more further standpoint in terms of startups and company, and that is a completely different topic in terms of the regulatory environment in terms of life sciences versus med tech. I think that in general, as a broad stroke, life sciences projects will take a lot of money, 10, 12 years of development. Med tech companies are certainly a little shorter, and they can be significantly shorter from really proving your concept in terms of publication, demonstrating it in practice, and then really bringing it to life. Also is a lot of hard work and not a small amount of luck as well. But it takes persistence, and with any startup, it's really it's all you in terms of believing in what you're doing and pushing forward, because no one's going to be there trying to push you forward, and so it's really about what you believe in and believing in yourself.
From Raj Parikh, he asks, with big databases, often they are not structured to appropriately capture outcomes of interest for plastic surgery. So do you think there's value for our own registries, or how do you make sure that meaningful studies are being performed?
Yeah, so that's a great topic. When I was starting in practice, 11 years ago, thinking about framing questions, I looked at the data, and you see either single institution studies that have smaller patients data, or these large databases that often are missing data points. And so how to really frame those in a meaningful way, and it's really importantly framing the right question. And in terms of plastic surgery, what I've thought about and realized over time is that in order to affect change, one needs to start working with the data and demonstrating the limitations. So I'll give you an example in terms of the NSQIP, which we know at this point, 30-day perioperative reporting, it really is not enough. For specifically plastic surgery, it requires 3 months at least of reporting. And so I think demonstrating this deficiency over time and again in literature, and then eventually hopefully being able to go to and talk to the agencies involved in terms of trying to affect that change can be something that is meaningful, but it does take time. It doesn't happen overnight. I illustrated that example of the DVT example of the Quad A data because of the fact that was a big data project. We were looking at a very narrow focus of mortality, unfortunately, and then looking at usage data in DVT. And on that data, the organization actually changed their policy for their outcomes reporting for all these 2,700 facilities. So if that's saved a couple lives in the future, then I consider that something that's significant that we were able to accomplish. So I think it is. It certainly requires a lot of planning and thought, but I think that the data is out there, and it's just about trying to utilize it.
A question from my other resident ambassador, Ira Savetsky. So Ira asks, do you think that we will get to a point where we will have devices that can monitor flaps as reliably as clinical evaluation, or even perhaps better?
Well, we're certainly working towards it, and I think that we will be able to find something that's pretty close. I think that nothing will supplant clinical exam, and certainly I don't think it should either, because you're looking at, even with the technology of a single 1 centimeter squared area, you're looking at one component, right? And that's why AI will never, they won't have a robotic or AI type of physician, because it requires a lot of other skill sets rather than looking at a very narrow focus. So, but it is just one data piece. I think that is helpful to patient care.
A question from Erez Diane. This is another practical question. Where do you suggest that one seek funding first in the initial stages of device development?
Sure. Thanks, Erez. I think that there's the traditional routes. Okay, so for startups, there's angel funding, of course, and angel funding is not angel funding, right? So of the hotbeds of startups here in the Silicon Valley and the West Coast, there are different levels of funding, but after that, of course, is more traditional routes of venture capital funds, and there are different companies that really specialize in various types of devices. So it's really trying to get your information out there and starting to meet with these folks. I think also really perfecting and honing the message. I think really coming up with a very concise 60-second or less, usually less, elevator pitch to really hammer home what the point of your project is forces you to really crystallize what's the most important thing, and for them, importantly, what does it mean in terms of value generation.
Great. A question from Terry Kuti. So she asks,
Terry.
I'm sorry?
I was saying hi to Terry.
Oh, hi to Terry, great. Are residents becoming engaged with patient advocates? How do you go about vetting true advocates? Because there are a great amount of patients on social media who share information that is both evidence-based and not so much.
Okay. No, thank you, Terry. You're a true ambassador to the field, and we look forward to seeing you at future meetings. I think that, and that's a great question. I think that to a degree, and you've been at these meetings now, so you know, but a little information can be dangerous. Currently, it's all out there, from an open access standpoint to articles. I think taking snippets of information, just like a snippet of information from a flap perfusion monitor, and trying to extrapolate that to and generalize it to whatever the patient, whatever situation you might be thinking about, can be overblown. And I think it really can be. It is important, of course, to be able to talk to these people. So I think, for one thing, social media has really extended and made the world smaller in a way, in order to contact people and be in contact with others, but as an old-fashioned way of going about it in terms of getting to know people and who the real actors are. It really boils down to interaction, and that interaction could be, as much as an exchange on Twitter or Instagram or one of these platforms, to of course, interacting on a Facebook Live type of situation as a town hall area, but it can be a challenge and in terms of understanding what that message might be and where they're coming from. So really understanding who and what background they might have is the thing. But it takes effort, like anything else. I think to be able to get to know someone at least more than a surface level on a social media platform.
All right. A question from Ginny Cho. So there is increasing interest in the use of robotic technology and high-def 3D optics to eliminate tremor and enable motion scaling in surgery. And she is asking about your thoughts and experience on areas in reconstructive surgery that could benefit most from robotic aid.
Right. So in our technology series in the last several years, Jesse Selber was able to write about robotic surgery. He indicated sort of a number of different areas of robotic usages for plastic surgery, both from latissimus harvest to TORS or transoral resection and to super microsurgery and lymphatic surgery. I think with anything, we all have some inherent amount of tremor for sure, and those areas such as the pelvis where insetting is going to be difficult, or of course in the back of the pharynx, in order to try to save one's cervical spine as long as possible. Those might be areas for robotic indications that would be helpful.
Great. Another question from Francesco Egro. What do you think the future is for cellular 3D printing in plastic surgery? Will we be engineering soft tissue from scratch? Decellularization and recellularization has shown great promise in multiple animal models.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely on the forefront. I think tissue engineering, as several decades in, has taken different turns for sure, and this is probably the latest turn. Several of our own plastic surgery folks have submitted grants related to being able to use scaffolds in a 3D printing way for organs, and I think we'll see some version of it in the future.
Great, and then I think this is going to be our final question for tonight.
Okay.
So Obaid Chowdhury asks, do you ever see technology replacing clinical training or judgment in the future, or is it a tool to augment it?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that we're all going to be, we're always going to need excellently trained clinicians. If technology and innovation can help our jobs do our jobs even better and take care of patients better, and I think that's always going to be a role for technology, but we're not going to ever replace AI. I don't think we'll ever replace clinical medicine, and so I think we'll all have our jobs still in the future.
Great. Well, I think that's a good way to end. Thank you so much again, Dr. Lin, for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thanks so much for staying.
And thanks, everybody. Don't forget to check out those article collections, and we look forward to seeing you for the next one.